The road to White Harbor would be long, thought the hound. He shared a horse with Lady Sansa, trotting through the snow-covered hills of the north.
I figured we'd come across someone so far.
It's still dark. Our people will rally together once light is upon us again.
If light ever finds us again.
This time of year, light only breaks through for maybe a few hours a day, at most.
Responded an exhausted Lady Sansa, as she rested her head against the back of the hound's armor. Ghost trailed behind the horse by a few steps, for the direwolf knew the greater threat was behind them. The hound then noticed Ghost sprint past them and out of sight. The hound followed quickly and heard the direwolf's distinct growling at some indistinct brush. The hound dismounted his steed and drew his greatsword. Lady Sansa continuously scanned the woods for the threat the wolf warned of. The hound was apparently taking the warning seriously. He broke her stiff concentration as he passed her the reins of the horse she now occupied alone.
Can you ride off?
Demanded the hound, and Lady Sansa silently agreed, her eyes still widening as she woke from her half-slumber.
Keep going south if you need to.
Informed the hound, and Lady Sansa silently agreed. The hound approached the brush, the direwolf still slightly ahead of him. A voice then called out from the brush in a mild panic.
Oi, will you call off your bloody bogan dog?
Pleaded a nervous voice. The hound yelled for Lady Sansa to call Ghost back over to her.
The fuck are you?
Asked the hound with his greatsword raised and ready to strike.
At the moment, pretty pissed off, eh?
You're Ironborn.
Asked the hound, though it was more of an accusation.
Aye, all me life. First mate Osmond to Theon Greyjoy. You seen that cagey bugger?
The hound then sheathed his sword.
He was commanding the archers when the battlements fell. Don't know if that cockless fucker made it out.
Replied the hound, watching diligently as Lady Sansa approached the pair of men atop her own horse.
He did, in fact.
Interrupted Lady Sansa as she was escorted by Ghost back to the pair of men.
He took Bran and Arya to the Godswood just before we evacuated the main hall.
And after that?
Demanded Osmond while sheathing his own sword, his eyes never truly disassociating from the approaching large white direwolf.
We don't know. We don't know anything about anyone.
Lamented Lady Sansa almost to herself.
Well, I gotta fuck off north then. Wait a tick. You're the bloody hound. Oh, you fucking legend.
Flattered the first mate, although the hound remained unimpressed with his own notoriety.
Nice to finally meet you, mate.
Give it time.
Responded the hound curtly as he retrieved the reins back from Lady Sansa.
Winterfell is burning to the ground. Most of our forces are destroyed. You'd do well to turn around and head back to White Harbor. Theon will be headed there.
Informed Lady Sansa. Osmond agreed, and the hound mounted his horse. The pair of horses headed south as Ghost kept a close eye on their new rider. The odd party crept along for another hour or so when Osmond held up a silent hand. The hound heard the clang of steel and the grunts of the living. Ghost sprinted toward them, and the pair of swordsmen dismounted and approached on foot. A small group of people were huddled together in a small clearing. Two men were trying to fight off nearly 24 dead soldiers. This was their first sighting of the dead south of Winterfell. The hound knew it wouldn't be the last. The hound began by swinging his greatsword two-handed at the soldiers' rear, on the far side of the survivors. Gendry and Ed Tollett were engaged, but were slowing. They had been fighting a long time, possibly ever since they left the crypts. The hound sent bodies flying, occasionally two at a time. The dead all eventually fell, and the hound heard a voice from below him.
Nice timing, Clegane.
Voiced a frigid Tyrion Lannister. Lord Varys and Missandei were also emerging from their huddle.
How the fuck did all you end up together?
We all evacuated the main hall when the castle walls fell.
Shh, shut your fucking traps.
Ordered First Mate Osmond, as he listened diligently to the wind.
More of them?
Asked the hound simply, and Ghost began to growl at the oncoming onslaught.
There are 2 horses behind us. The 4 of you get your asses out of here.
suggested the Hound, and Lady Sansa then interjected.
But there are hundreds of them.
Then you better get bloody moving.
Retorted the Hound. Lord Tyrion, Varys, Missandei, and Lady Sansa doubled up on the horses and rode quickly off to a safe distance. The Hound, Osman, Gendry, and Ed took their position, knowing they would soon be overrun.
6 of us held off thousands of them beyond the wall.
Claimed the Hound. It was clear he was attempting some rare optimism.
Well, isn't that just another sign the world is ending?
Taunted Lord Gendry, to the general chuckle of the rest of the swordsmen.
Cheeky bastard.
Recently naturalized.
Responded Lord Gendry to the newest member of the small brigade. Not soon thereafter, a pessimistic voice put their positivity back in their place.
Likely this will be the shortest lordship in history.
Responded Ed while raising his sword.
Y'all realize this few of us is gonna do sweet fuck all?
Exclaimed Osman just before the dead charged over the hill. Lady Sansa had greatly underestimated their numbers. The Hound severed the first 3 in a single swing of his greatsword. Lord Gendry found a boulder to perch on and attacked from high ground as the dead surrounded him. Osman had been knocked on his back. He held the dead at bay by digging his boot heels into his attacker's collarbone. A flaming sword then impaled the soldier through its chest and lit the dead on fire.
Oi, top fucking bloke.
Shouted Osman as he regained his feet. His savior wielded a flaming sword and continued his assault.
Welcome back to the shit show, Beric.
Shouted the Hound as Samwell Tarly joined the fight and was back to back with Ed Tollard. Ed then slumped onto Samwell's back. Sam turned to pick him up and saw the sword protruding from Ed's chest and a look of shock on his brother's face. Samwell held him up as Ed was stabbed again in the back and then again. Sam retreated until his back had reached the boulder. He continued to hold Ed as a shield, for Sam knew Ed was gone. The dead attacked Sam from his right. Just as the dead had reached Sam, its head was smashed against the boulder. Again and again the dead fell, who were within striking distance of Samwell. Lord Gendry from atop the boulder had heard Samwell and was blasting the dead with his warhammer. He grabbed Sam by his cloak and assisted him up onto the large boulder. Ed slid down and fell underneath the onslaught. Sir Beric and the Hound continued cutting down the dead.
Fear not,
Claimed Sir Beric as he swung and slashed.
all is as the Lord wills it, for the night is dark.
Sir Beric was then interrupted by the lone Ironborn.
Oi, we know it's fucking dark out, and the bloody night is full of dickheads.
Screamed Osman as he kicked a corpse off of his sword. Flames roared and then encircled the survivors from above. Rhaegal had joined the fight as the flames encompassed the 5 remaining men. Jon enclosed the men and then quickly landed Rhaegal outside the circle. Ghost sprinted towards the dragon and turned on Jon's heel. Jon leapt off his dragon and charged through the flames into the fray. The remaining soldiers inside the circle of fire fell under the combined efforts of Jon, the Hound, Osman, and Gendry. Rhaegal devastated the dead from the ground outside the perimeter that couldn't penetrate to the remaining survivors. Jon decimated the dead. He was furious, and it showed. Once the dead had thinned out, the Hound and Osman watched as Jon charged at every remaining soldier. Ghost learned to attack their weapon arm, quickly removing it before Jon would approach the defenseless soldier. Jon then sighed once he thought the battle was over. His breath turned to fog when he felt the familiar chill in the northern air. A moonlit figure then casually walked through the flames, sword in hand. The walker's presence was so cold it bent the flames that protected the living. The walker was headed straight towards Rhaegal and Bran. Jon then turned to Sir Beric and Lord Gendry.
Don't try and help.
King Jon commanded, but the Lord of Storm's End was quick to retort.
We need you alive, Jon.
Protested the breathless Lord Gendry as he shouldered his warhammer.
So do the walkers.
Jon replied as he charged towards the lone White Walker. Both raised their swords as their assumed battle was now imminent. King Jon then sprinted to within striking distance. The water then unexpectedly exploded and crumbled into a pile of ice shards. Jon screeched to a halt and turned on the spot. The dragon fire that protected them had started to diminish. Jon peered through the lowering flames and couldn't believe his own eyes. Sitting atop a pile of bodies was a wildling woman with a bow and quiver. Jon was speechless. Her red hair and grubby furs reminded him of Ygritte. Jon swore it was her, especially when she spoke to him.
The standard response would be, "Thank you, King Crow."
Jon gulped as his voice originally failed him. He reset himself and tried his voice again.
Who are you, milady?
Not a lady, King Crow. The name is Munda. Munda Giantsbane.
She responded simply. Jon remembered she was sent to Hardhome to retrieve the dragon glass he lost.
And what of the glass?
It just saved your ass. You seen me, puppy?
She asked, and Jon assumed she meant Tormund.
Not yet. We're still in full retreat.
Admitted Jon as the flames had now extinguished. Munda Giantsbane strolled past him to retrieve her dragon glass arrow perched atop the pile of ice shards. The Hound then turned to Jon.
How the fuck did you find us?
Sir Beric's sword.
Jon quickly replied. Dawn was setting upon them and the snow glowed under the slightest light. Jon then approached Sir Beric.
Bran's hurt. He needs you, sir.
Jon pleaded with worry in his eyes. Sir Beric and Jon then climbed onto Rhaegal. Still Bran remained unconscious and as pale as the northern landscape.
The tourniquet saved his life, no doubt,
informed Sir Beric as he lit his flaming sword and cauterized his severed leg.
Any idea how it happened?
Theon brought him out of the Godswood. He was already like this. I don't know what happened.
Theon Greyjoy, where is that cheeky bastard?
Asked Osman with great interest. Jon then bowed his head and responded with a heavy heart.
He's gone.
Fuck me dead, how?
Saving Bran and I. He died a hero.
Informed Jon as Lady Sansa and Lord Tyrion approached on horseback. Lady Sansa quickly dismounted and ran towards Bran, who had been placed upon the ground. Samwell was tending to him and was in process of elevating his injured leg. Lady Sansa wept over her brother as Bran calmly stirred. He tried to speak to her but was still far too weak. Lord Tyrion then rode over to Jon.
All was lost then.
More or less.
And the Queen?
Demanded Lord Tyrion, almost reminding King Jon that Daenerys was proceeding to White Harbor by herself.
Flying south. She was ahead of me when I stopped to pick up Bran.
Samwell then approached Jon and appraised him of Bran's condition and of Ed's death. It was as much as Jon could handle at that moment. His brother injured, his friends dead, Arya missing and his first love seemingly reincarnated to haunt him. Ghost sat at his heel and burrowed his head under his arm. Jon then scratched his direwolf's head.
We need to keep moving south.
Jon informed them. He turned towards the Hound and directed him to personally escort Munda to the Queen's flagship. The Hound reluctantly agreed as Jon explained her extreme importance. Likely he only agreed as Lady Sansa would now accompany her brother atop Rhaegal for the remainder of their journey south. Jon directed Ed's body placed upon the boulder of which he died next to. Rhaegal stirred under Jon as numerous horses and riders surrounded the boulder and the last Lord Commander of the Night's Watch. Jon's words were short and his face was long.
Rest easy, brother. Your watch has ended, and we have the watch.
Rhaegal roared and lit the boulder aflame almost until it glowed as bright as the rising sun. Jon lamented having to burn so many of his brothers and sisters. Rhaegal then took flight to White Harbor, as Jon realized what had been troubling him the most. Theon's failed dragon glass thrust into the Night King and nearly their entire force had been destroyed. Still, they had no information as to how to dispose of the Night King. Dragon fire had been equally ineffective. Jon then realized that Munda and the Dragonstone caves now held the only possible answers. The remaining Dothraki rode south hard. Ser Jorah was keeping up on a horse he commandeered once the evacuation had begun. Some horses had lost their riders and joined their gallop south. Ser Jorah joined the pack of no more than 20 horses, but only half had riders. Darkness was still upon them, though the hills to the east had started to brighten. He had reached the front of the pack and realized they were miles from Winterfell. Viserion was dead, and they seemed safe for the moment. They had been riding parallel to a stream that had not frozen over yet. Ser Jorah was waiting to reach a decent clearing to rule out an ambush before watering their horses. There he saw 3 horses doing just that, and brought the Dothraki to a trot.
Sir Jaime,
Announced a relieved Ser Jorah. Sir Jaime was relieved to see a friendly face, as was Lady Brienne and Ser Davos.
Is anyone else with you?
a few Dothraki and spare horses. How did you get out?
Asked Ser Jorah as he dismounted his horse and guided it to the stream.
Tormund, he
Stuttered Lady Brienne as she couldn't finish the sentence.
He sacrificed himself.
Admitted Sir Jaime before bending low and drinking from the stream.
I see. Anyone else survive or confirmed?
We lost Sir Royce, Lord Glover, and Lyanna. I'm so sorry, Ser Jorah.
Lamented Lady Brienne. Ser Jorah wasn't surprised to hear this. He knew Lyanna would represent their house well, but it would be naive to the point of foolishness to think she would have survived. Or run. He gripped Longclaw's hilt, now realizing he was the last of his house.
We should rotate the horses. We have a long ride ahead of us. We'd be lucky to find more stragglers on our way south.
Ser Jorah finished. The horses that Ser Jorah spoke of had begun to stir. Ser Jorah immediately recognized this and climbed to high ground for a better vantage point. He was joined by Sir Jaime shortly thereafter.
How many do you suppose?
Maybe 20 or 30.
Ser Jorah answered with a hint of optimism in his deep voice.
How long do you think?
5 minutes at most. We could have miles between us in an hour's ride.
We'd be running the whole way to White Harbor. They already know we're here. If they join with a larger force, they'll become a bigger problem.
We fight then. We'll make quick work of them.
Exclaimed Lady Brienne as she interrupted the two knights.
Aye, we fight then.
Exclaimed Ser Davos. Ser Jorah then explained the plan to the Dothraki in their native tongue. Soon after, the Blood Riders mounted their horses in anticipation. Swords were unsheathed, and the Dothraki started their screams. Sir Jaime was the first to break ranks and charge at the dead. All others then followed his lead. They cut down the dead with ease. Not a single man was lost. A rumble was felt in the ground as a wave of additional dead then approached. Ser Jorah grimaced as he saw at least 1,000 soldiers charging at them. Sir Jaime then shouted,
It was a scouting party. Flee south now.
The dozen or so horses sprinted along the stream and the dead raced along both banks. They had been outflanked on both sides and were closing the range. Ser Jorah's horse was in full gallop as 2 dead were being dragged by his horse, slowing it considerably. His horse then collapsed from its injuries and threw Ser Jorah from it. He rose to his feet and wheeled Longclaw about. A small handful of the remaining Dothraki gathered around Ser Jorah as they were prepared to make their final stand. Ser Jorah thought of his queen, never knowing he had survived Winterfell, just to die on the road south. He sighed and raised his Valyrian steel. Ser Davos stood firmly next to Ser Jorah. The rumble felt through the ground was now coming from behind them. Ser Davos's eyes glanced over his shoulder. To Ser Jorah's amazement, hundreds, maybe thousands of cavalry were charging at the dead. They were well organized and enveloped the survivors inside a secure perimeter. It was over within minutes. The mystery riders outnumbered the dead 2 to 1. Brienne, Jorah, Jaime, and Davos were in awe at their saviors. The rear of the perimeter broke, and 2 riders slowly approached. Ser Davos was then the first to speak.
It's the Red Woman.
He exclaimed, and Davos was furious at her audacity.
Ser Davos, I presume.
Melisandre greeted the Onion Knight as an old friend.
You have a death sentence on your head in the north. Which?
Exclaimed Sir Davos, his voice slightly shaking.
As did you all, until very recently.
Surely the sins of the past can be overlooked for a brief amount of time.
Said the rider next to the Red Woman. Jorah's head snapped toward him as he had recognized the voice. The rider trotted forward as his face came into view.
Well, if it isn't Jorah the Andal, coming to your aid is becoming somewhat of an old habit.
Jorah then peered into the confident, smug face of Daario Naharis.
The Second Sons are here to defend the North.
Claimed Melisandre, and Ser Jorah then replied reluctantly.
The North has fallen.
The narrow sea brought a small amount of comfort to Arya. Her last 2 voyages across it had been slightly more pleasant. Now, knowing her home was destroyed, thousands had died, and Cersei still lived. They had been at sea for nearly a week, and their destination was still days ahead of them. The Greyjoy ship she was sailing on was of great interest to Arya, just as most vessels were. Lady Yara had emerged from her cabin and was making her rounds topside. Arya picked out a few words she understood: mast, sail, rudder, and heading. Yara had then removed a brass instrument from a small wooden box and gazed up at the sky. It seemed a small challenge to her when utilizing only one of her arms. Her left still resided in a sling around her neck. Arya then approached her with hundreds of questions on her mind. Yara obliged Arya and took her on a tour topside, and eventually they ended up on the aft platform where young Valen was learning to tie knots. Yara then asked about Theon, and Arya's shoulders slumped.
He fought bravely. I witnessed it firsthand, but I don't know what happened to him. I heard a rumor about Theon, is it true?
Yara nodded in agreement as Arya gasped.
Is his son here?
He is. He's been staying in my cabin. He's almost 5 now.
You should ask Jon to legitimize him. I'm sure he would.
Aye, he might.
Answered Yara as she adjusted the helm. Arya then walked to the forecastle. There she saw Jon, Sansa, and Gendry. Arya casually placed herself in between her brother and the newly christened Lord of Storm's End.
Yara still doesn't know about Theon. Thought she would want to hear it from you.
Aye, she should hear it from me.
Responded Jon reluctantly before Arya carefully continued.
She has a favor to ask of you. In Theon's memory.
Arya finished and Jon nodded in agreement. Ghost sat patiently near Jon and Gendry. Arya scratched his head, now listening to the conversation she had recently interrupted.
So the dragon glass was ineffective.
I saw it with my own eyes, Sansa. We need to speak to Bran.
I'll check on him. Sam said he is doing well, but he's still asleep.
Lady Sansa finished before she departed and headed below decks. Without warning, Lady Yara started shouting at her deckhands. Something about dropping canvas was all Arya could make out. Jon turned as his confusion was evident.
Why would we want to slow down?
He said aloud. A deckhand came carrying a rope ladder and cast it over the side. A minute or 2 passed, and then Ser Jorah Mormont appeared and sprang over the railing. Jon then greeted him in relief.
We thought we lost you.
It took nearly a week to row from ship to ship to reach the flagship. Evacuating with ravens would have been more convenient.
Daenerys will be relieved to see you. She's been mourning you and Grey Worm for some time now.
Informed Jon, and Ser Jorah's face slumped. How? The old knight inquired.
Grey Worm killed Viserion, for good this time.
Ser Jorah tightened his grip on the saddlebags over his shoulder.
She's in the captain's quarters.
Jon informed him, but offered the 2 of them proper privacy.
We'll need to talk later, about the Second Sons.
Ser Jorah suggested, and Jon silently agreed. Ser Jorah then departed to visit his queen. Lady Arya twirled her dagger in her hand, staring out to the sea. Lord Gendry asked to see it, and Arya offered him the dragonbone handle.
Valyrian steel.
Lord Gendry was astonished, but still acted as if he had seen the ancient steel before. He held it close and examined it diligently.
Dragonfire was worthless, as was dragonglass. What about Valyrian steel?
Theon had Heartsbane, but couldn't land a blow. We'd have to get extremely lucky to have the Night King engage someone competent in swordsmanship, with one of a handful of swords remaining in the kingdom. It might be why the Night King has been avoiding me.
So we get more,
responded Lady Arya simply. Jon giggled slightly, but attempted to conceal it.
It just might be that simple. My master could reforge it, as he did with Ned Stark's sword. I watched him meticulously, and he showed me how. We were sworn to secrecy. If the wrong people found out, we would be kidnapped or killed.
We seem to be in short supply of the steel at the moment.
Maybe not.
Gendry replied as he returned catspaw to Lady Arya.
You know of some stockpile of Valyrian steel just sitting around?
I might,
answered Lord Gendry, looking slightly annoyed at her sarcasm.
But the Queen won't like it.
Which Queen?
Lady Arya inquired. She could see Gendry contemplating his answer before he simply responded.
Both, actually.
Ser Jorah knocked at the door and he heard no answer. He drew a deep breath and entered anyway. He moved slowly into the dark cabin, fearing she may not be decent, as he remained uninvited. Jorah noticed trays of food uneaten and pitchers of wine still full. What frightened Jorah more than anything was what he saw on the floor. Silver braids of hair were cut and strewn carelessly about the floor. 5, no 8, Ser Jorah counted. He knew what this had meant, not many others would. Daenerys was taking her first defeat hard, and Jorah was concerned for her. She had remained true to her Dothraki culture. Jorah then decided to call out to her.
Khaleesi,
whispered Ser Jorah. He then heard the pat of bare feet on the cabin's wood-planked floor. Daenerys had forgone all tradition and manners and leapt into her longtime advisor's arms. For what seemed like minutes, both Jorah and Daenerys did not speak. Jorah placed his hand gently on the back of the Queen's head. He could feel her bare, bloodied scalp and tried not to overreact. Daenerys openly wept like Jorah had never seen her do before. The battle had, no doubtedly, taken its toll on her.
Is it true, what they're saying about Torgo Mutho?
Inquired Ser Jorah softly. Queen Daenerys released him as he wiped her face with his unbloodied hand.
It is. Lady Arya saw it.
Daenerys lamented. She refused eye contact and looked around the cabin for anything to distract her from the present conversation.
He died free, Khaleesi,
responded Ser Jorah, his voice slightly shaking.
He shouldn't have died at all. None of them
Queen Daenerys was then interrupted.
This is war, Khaleesi. You've won many battles, but it took 1 million undead soldiers to drive Daenerys Stormborn back.
Responded a supportive Ser Jorah, but just prior to finishing his statement,
but we're still here.
Ser Jorah encouraged, and this brought a sliver of a smile to Daenerys' face.
Grey Worm chose to follow you, as did I. He chose his fate, a free man, full of pride that you offered to him.
Ser Jorah paused as Queen Daenerys had to again wipe the tears from her face.
He'll be the most famous former slave who ever lived, and he'd do it all again, if he knew you needed him to.
I've missed you these past few days. I feared the worst.
Queen Daenerys admitted. Aye, responded Ser Jorah as he took in the room. He was fixated on her locks of silver hair littering the floor.
Dothraki customs die hard, I see,
said Jorah as he cleared the side table of a bloody razor and numerous braids of silver hair.
Yes, they will always be a part of me.
Queen Daenerys admitted while now taking an interest in Ser Jorah's saddlebags.
They aren't the only part of your past that has come full circle. Daario has brought the Second Sons to Westeros, and he sails for Dragonstone.
Admitted Ser Jorah, and Queen Daenerys attempted to not seem shocked.
How do you know?
He rescued a group of us on the road south.
We'll deal with that when the time comes.
Dragonstone is a small isle, my queen. It may be beneficial to get ahead of this.
It will.
Queen Daenerys agreed as Ser Jorah noted her return to formality.
What of Lord Tyrion?
He is well and on board.
Pleased to hear it.
Admitted Ser Jorah honestly. He returned to his saddlebags on the table in the middle of the room.
I have another gift for you.
Another Lannister, I assume.
Queen Daenerys' face slightly cracked at her own attempt at humor.
I'm afraid not.
Responded Ser Jorah stoically. He removed folded lengths of blue leather from his bag.
The Ironborn are some of the best tanners in the world.
Queen Daenerys' mouth was agape as she recognized the gift before being told.
I came across Viserion after he died when the Godswood was quiet. I thought you might want to have a piece of him. Perhaps Lady Sansa could assist you.
Help me how?
Inquired the Queen, understanding the gift, but she was not necessarily clear on its function.
If you made a garment out of it, you could pass through any fire and remain clothed.
Smiled Ser Jorah. Daenerys was taken aback from Ser Jorah's thoughtfulness. His concern for her seemed almost fatherly.
The only thing I'll treasure more is the thought that came with it.
Admitted Daenerys. She embraced him again and gave thanks to the Seven that he had returned to her side once more. Lord Tyrion and Varys shared a cabin on the Greyjoy flagship. Varys had took Tyrion's advice and partook in a shared cup.
It does dull the senses and drowns a man's sorrows.
That is the point. Have we achieved a final count of our forces?
Reports are still coming in, but it doesn't look good.
It could have been worse, let's be honest. A single dragon is worth 100,000 men in the field. Perhaps even more.
Responded Lord Tyrion while finishing his goblet.
Both of ours survived and the dead lost theirs.
That's more than a silver lining, to be sure.
If you can look past the loss of life, the reinforcements from Meereen will surely help.
Only if you can look past the complication.
So Daario is now a complication.
He is not a humble man, skilled in both battle and conversation. Will Jon Snow have the patience to deal with such a man, knowing his history?
The king in the north has the patience of a sept. I'd be more concerned about the queen losing her temper.
So now that the Second Sons might outnumber the Dothraki, Unsullied and Northmen combined, Daario wields much more influence.
Indeed he may.
Added Lord Tyrion, choosing again to refill his goblet.
If the Queen's marriage happened to dissolve, King Jon could compete for the Iron Throne and start a third civil war on a single continent.
The last thing Jon Snow desires is more war. I can't imagine he would ever press his claim.
Great harm can be done with a momentary lapse of empathy, not always with intended malice.
Responded Lord Varys, and Tyrion stared at his goblet.
I've always liked you better when you drink. Speaking of liking someone better, how did Daario know we were in need of assistance?
He sailed at my invitation.
Answered Lord Varys confidently, and Tyrion felt his heart sink.
Have you been in contact with him?
Quite frequently, in fact.
It all worked out in the end. Relatively. I think it's time I visited our beloved queen. She seems to be in better spirits since Ser Jorah's return.
Finished Lord Tyrion. Varys peered through the cabin's windows as the Queen's hand calmly left the room. Lord Tyrion was in a full panic. All his years in King's Landing had taught him many lessons. The most important of them was to maintain your panic on the interior. Lord Tyrion toured topside as Ser Jorah was in conversation with Jon Snow. Jon had just learned of the passing of Tormund Giantsbane. How many conversations were taking place that resembled the one before him? Someone who witnessed another's death is taking the responsibility to inform those close to the deceased.
Lord Tyrion.
Jon had addressed him as he daydreamed. A distracted Lord Tyrion then responded,
Yes, Your Grace.
I'm calling a special war council in the Queen's chambers at sundown. I'd like you specifically to attend, my Lord Hand.
I'd be honored to assist in any way I can, Your Grace.
Responded Lord Tyrion. Jon left the men. He was obviously shaken by the death of Tormund, Lord Tyrion thought. He then acquired Ser Jorah's attention.
We need to speak privately and immediately.
Demanded Lord Tyrion, and he could see Ser Jorah's face dishearten. Once inside Tyrion's cabin, the Hand ensured they were alone.
You once told me you operated as a sellsword in Essos.
I did for many years.
Is there any way to communicate with Captain Strickland before we land at Dragonstone?
Asked Lord Tyrion, and Ser Jorah seemed confused.
The captain of the Golden Company? His life is in danger, as are the allegiance of his 20,000 men.
With the help of Lord Varys, we could...
Lord Tyrion then cut Ser Jorah off.
No, Lord Varys cannot be included. This is why I'm here with you.
Informed Lord Tyrion, and Ser Jorah's concerned look worsened.
What has happened?
It's just a theory of mine. The evacuation of Casterly Rock. The Greyjoy ambush of our fleet and Cersei, allowing the audience with my brother Jaime.
And now you're concerned about the secrecy of the Strickland defection.
Ser Jorah added, and Lord Tyrion silently agreed. With the Battle of Winterfell, he nearly had forgotten of Lord Tyrion's hypothesis of a defector in Daenerys' camp.
She's been one step ahead all this time.
And you assume Lord Varys?
Inquired Ser Jorah, standing up slightly straighter.
Not exactly.
Jon was walking towards the stern as the sun was nearly set. Yara wasted no time ordering rudder adjustments now that the various stars had shown themselves.
Captain Greyjoy.
Your Grace.
She responded with a slight bow.
A week at sea, and we seem to have been avoiding each other.
Aye. Perhaps we have your Grace.
Admitted the seasoned sea captain.
Is there any particular reason?
Gossip spreads quickly on ships, your Grace. Rumor was you were with my brother when he died. If we never spoke, or if you did not seek me out, perhaps he lives.
He does not. The gods give him rest.
Informed Jon simply and carefully. Lady Yara closed her eyes reverently, though she showed no emotion.
How?
He was killed by the Night King himself. He bought me time to get Bran onto the dragon. It was the most noble act I've ever witnessed. And I've spent many years surrounded by the noblest of men.
He was raised by wolves. I cannot be surprised.
Flattered Lady Yara, and Jon returned her slight smile.
Was he afraid? I mean, did he show fear?
Inquired Yara, her voice slightly shaking. Still, she maintained her composure. King Jon slowly approached her and placed his hands on her shoulders.
Not for a moment.
Reassured Jon, and Yara slowly let out the deep breath she was holding. Tears welled in her eyes as she spoke.
I have someone I'd like you to meet.
Offered Lady Yara, clearly attempting to quickly change the subject matter. She then called to young Valen. The boy, nearly 5 years old, quickly ran over to her.
I have someone I'd like you to meet. This is Jon Snow, the King of the Seven Kingdoms.
She stated, and young Valen hid behind Yara's legs until Jon bent down to a knee. Valen then peeked out from behind her.
Hello, Valen.
Responded a smiling King Jon. He then looked up to Yara and asked,
Your son.
My nephew, your Grace.
Yara corrected. A feeling of disbelief, shock, happiness, and despair all gripped Jon at once.
It's true what they say, then. What is dead doesn't actually die. How?
When Theon returned to the Iron Islands, at Robb Stark's command, he sired a son with the captain's daughter of the ship that carried him there. We will raise him as Ironborn, but wish him to be called Greyjoy.
Lady Yara offered. Jon thought about what she was asking, and then his attention turned back to young Valen. Jon held out an inviting hand, while still on a single knee. Valen was coerced out of hiding by his aunt and took Jon's hand. Jon then spoke directly to him, disregarding the fact he was unlikely to understand what King Jon was offering him.
Your father saved my life. He was an honorable man, and you shall share in his name, and his father's before him. Lord Valen Greyjoy, heir to the Iron Islands.
Exclaimed King Jon ceremoniously. He then turned his attention back to Lady Yara.
I'll have Samwell draw up the decree tonight.
Offered Jon. Lady Greyjoy bowed slightly in appreciation. She thanked him before Jon proceeded to the Queen's chambers. Once Jon entered the room, all its inhabitants stood immediately. Jon surveyed the room, Queen Daenerys was not present. Those who were comprised of the best minds Westeros had to offer. The Red Woman, Samwell, Sansa, Tyrion, Ser Davos, as well as Munda and Missandei had all taken their seats.
Thank you all for coming.
Jon opened before Lord Tyrion spoke up.
Abnormal war council, Your Grace. Not a single warrior amongst us.
That's the idea. We tried the militaristic approach. I failed. I made assumptions, and I was wrong. And tens of thousands paid the ultimate price.
Not one person alive would hold you responsible for what happened.
Agreed.
Piped Ser Davos as he stood and remained at Jon's side.
Nevertheless, we need to work together. So I've decided to gather those whom I trust the most. Here is our situation. The North was lost. Our forces dwindled to less than 15%. The Second Sons have pledged their 2,000 men, which put our numbers just under 4,000. We learned from the loss of Winterfell that Dragonfire has no effect on the Night King or the White Walkers. But probably most importantly, we learned the Night King himself is impervious to dragonglass.
The crowded room then gasped at this information.
Valyrian steel may still be an option, but more on that at a later time. Samwell, if you would.
Offered King Jon softly. Samwell Tarly then began his briefing.
The Walkers have left various symbols, possibly as a means of communication. The two that repeat most often were interpreted by Missandei of Narth.
Reported Sam, now inviting her to speak. Missandei then rose to her feet and further explained herself.
The symbols are without question the old tongue, first brought to Westeros by the first men. They had not yet achieved written word, so they devised a series of hieroglyphics. Interpretation is tricky, because there are more words than symbols. Therefore, they often have multiple, but similar meanings. The two symbols Lord Tarly is referring to, we believe, to be beginning and conflict, but could refer to something else.
Munda Giantsbane. Your father told us you studied the old tongue with its last known speakers.
I have your grace. The translation is as accurate as it can be. Context is the trick. The original markings could tell us more.
We are in luck then. There are cave markings created by the first men on Dragonstone containing these symbols.
The winds be kind, we should arrive on the morrow.
Aye. This council will be led to the caves upon docking. Any and all theories shall be given the utmost attention. If there is anything left to add.
Jon then scanned the crowd. He could feel the tension in Ser Davos's voice. He felt as if he would have to deal with this situation sooner rather than later.
Very well. Miss Melisandre and Ser Davos, would you mind remaining behind for a moment?
Suggested King Jon, though he expected the strictest of obedience. The rest of the lords and ladies understood this as a dismissal and quickly left the Queen's chambers. Lord Tyrion closed the door behind him. The eye contact led Jon to believe he understood the gravity of their situation. King Jon then turned to Melisandre.
We owe you thanks, High Priestess. We would have had far more significant losses had you not continued serving the crown.
Jon flattered and Melisandre bowed her head in appreciation.
Men should keep their word. Kings most of all. I told you if you ever returned to the north, I'd hang you as a murderer. But we are not in the north.
Jon finished as Ser Davos sighed loudly, voicing his disapproval.
Your good deeds have bought you time, but your wickedness will not go unpunished.
I appreciate the stay of execution, Your Grace. I willfully submit to your judgment, once the Night King is destroyed.
Responded Melisandre while peering into Jon's eyes.
Once, or if. Do you know something we don't?
Demanded Ser Davos, and King Jon patiently awaited her response.
I only know what I see in the flames. I have misinterpreted before.
My son died serving your visions.
Scolded Ser Davos while rising from his chair. Jon stepped between the two and tried to calm the situation.
Ser Davos, you are to escort her onto Dragonstone. Report to me anything you deem criminal. Take no action without my consent.
As you will, Your Grace.
Answered a furious Ser Davos. Jon approached the Red Woman, his face stern.
Heed my tone, priestess. The slightest treachery on your part will result in the quickest death you can possibly imagine. Any leeches or deceit, you as much as sacrifice a pigeon. I will end you with my own hand.
Threatened Jon. The Red Woman was bold enough to slowly take Jon's hand in hers. She gently pulled open his balled fist and stared into his palm.
Sacrifices will still need to be made, my king. But by your hand, not my own.
Melisandre foretold as Jon pulled his hand back and angrily left the cabin. The crisp ocean air filled Jon's mouth as he walked topside. A man was leaning against the railing as if he was waiting for Jon.
All hail the king in the north.
You must be Dario Naharis.
The one and only.
I owe you thanks. You assisted many people close to me.
So I've heard.
Claimed Dario. Tyrion did not undersell Dario's boldness, Jon thought.
So I hear you married the queen. She often spoke of marrying a local.
Informed Dario with a pompous sense. Jon had started this conversation with an open mind, though his patience was now running thin.
You know she has a wild side to her. A shame she decided to tame it.
The sellsword taunted, and Jon got the sense that Dario was attempting to measure him.
Aye, she does. Though she has matured lately.
Jon admitted with a wide smirk.
Of course not, Your Grace. Forgive me. I never intended.
Dario was then interrupted by Jon.
Your intentions are irrelevant, but I'm starting to see it.
It? Dario asked boldly.
The reason Dany left you in Essos.
Jon withdrew from the conversation and proceeded back to his quarters. Dario was left, his tongue poking the inside of his cheek. Queen Daenerys had lit numerous candles in their chambers and sat on the side of her bed staring into the fire. Jon approached her from behind and wrapped his arms around her.
You've changed your hair.
He whispered in her ear. Her mind was in a faraway place until Jon's voice brought her back. She smiled and rested her head on his shoulder.
Do you truly love me?
Asked Jon, and Dany was taken aback by the question.
Until the end of my days.
I'm gonna need to remind you that you said that.
And why is that?
Lord Gendry has an idea, of which we are in short supply.
And this will anger me.
Probably. Yeah, definitely.
Jon stuttered. Dany laughed at his presumption, almost like she loved seeing a confident man stumble over his own words, Jon thought.
We need more Valyrian steel, and Lord Gendry knows how to reforge it.
So he can create it?
Asked Daenerys, though she was not confident in her question, nor of Jon's answer.
Not exactly. It needs to exist already.
It's incredibly rare, though, isn't it?
It is. But we may know where to find a lot, actually.
And where would that be?
Asked Daenerys with a combination of caution and intrigue.
King's Landing, in the throne room.
He specified, and the look on Queen Daenerys' face almost saddened.
How can we do it?
She asked, and Jon was puzzled, almost shocked. This did not go unnoticed by Daenerys.
You assumed I'd disagree.
Not exactly. I didn't know what to expect, actually.
A rider sped through the river gate of King's Landing. The 3 golden skulls on his saddle fluttered as he rode his horse hard through the streets. He eventually reached the Red Keep, which was exclusively guarded by Lannister soldiers. He reached the stables, secured his horse, and briskly strolled to the throne room. The scroll in his pocket had been a royal summons. As the second in command of the Golden Company, Sir Hunts showed concern for the fate of his captain on his northern mission. Sir Hunts entered the throne room. Queen Cersei felt particularly satisfied with herself. Sir Hunts approached the Iron Throne as Sir Gregor stepped out from behind Cersei. Sir Hunts noted that the lion they gifted the throne was chained at multiple vantage points leading up to the top of the throne room pillars. He counted 4, no 5 attachment points. It limited Tywin's movement in any direction to a few steps. He would typically lie at the base of the steps leading to the throne and its queen. A man was on his knees, shackled and facing the queen. Sir Hunts walked to just behind the captive. and then he seemed to recognize him. Tywin was mere feet away, continuously licking his own face in anticipation of a feeding.
You summoned me, Your Grace. I bring news from the field.
The Crown appreciates your swift arrival, Sir Hunts. I too have news, but would allow you first.
The North has fallen, and the dead continue south. They have crossed the Neck and have entered the Riverlands. Your Grace...
Very well. This intelligence was expected. Tell me, Sir Hunts, to whom do your loyalties lie?
To the contract, Your Grace.
Sir Hunts responded quickly and without thought, a quality deemed vital to a good soldier, Cersei thought.
That is good to hear, but unfortunately, your leadership does not share your sentiment. Captain Strickland has conspired with the Crown's enemies. So I ask you, Sir Hunts, if placed in command, who will you serve?
My loyalties lie with the contract, Your Grace, not with any one man.
This had sealed Captain Strickland's fate. Cersei had only kept him alive long enough to confirm the contract status under Sir Hunt's command. Cersei's sinister smile smeared across her face. He had expected to be addressed further, but Qyburn was the one who directed him toward the side of the throne. Qyburn then addressed Captain Strickland directly.
In the name of Cersei of House Lannister, first of her name, Queen of the Andals and the First Men, sentences you to die. Have you any last words?
A bruised and beaten Strickland finally raised his head and uttered,
"Long live the dragon."
Lin Payne then walked in front of Cersei as she rose from the throne slowly. Sir Payne unlatched the shackle in front of the throne, allowing Tywin to move forward multiple steps. The chain dragged across the stone floor as Strickland's eyes met Cersei's.
Hear me roar,
she said simply as Tywin attacked Strickland. His screams filled the throne room as Cersei stared in delight of her enemy's pain. A final snap was heard and the screaming abruptly ceased. Sir Hunts looked on and attempted to keep his bearing. Cersei noticed this and addressed him.
My sources are well placed, Sir Hunts. I assure you, he betrayed us both.
Of course, Your Grace.
Please brief Qyburn on our way forward. I am very interested to hear your plans on how to deal with the northern threat.
Right away, my queen.
Sir Hunts responded. Queen Cersei stood and exited the throne room abruptly. Once back in her chambers, she poured herself a glass as her thoughts turned to speech. Her hand paused as he entered her study, as Cersei seemed to be speaking aloud to herself. Once she turned to acknowledge him, he began his report.
I have verified that the captain's execution was successful, Your Grace.
I do enjoy watching him feed. Such passion and fury. It's remarkable, really.
Responded Queen Cersei, quite satisfied and almost giddy. She wondered of what her father would have thought of her most recent execution. No doubt their second-in-command would now offer her nothing but his utmost loyalty. The singer's words were now echoing in her ears.
Our mutual friend in the north has been, until now, quite informative.
Yes. Yes, he has. But no word since the fall of the north.
The view of land was a welcomed sight for Sam. He was still startled when the dragons would pass low over the fleet. He watched as they gracefully lapped the Dragonstone castle on the horizon. The skiffs were loaded with a garrison of Unsullied who would quickly clear the island prior to sending the rest of them ashore. Gilly had joined him topside with a bucket. They were never that far from Sam these past 10 days at sea. Little Sam accompanied them and took in the sights as well. Queen Daenerys was atop Drogon, but Jon stayed on board their flagship.
Thought you should know. Bran is awake.
Gilly informed him, and a smile spread across Samwell's face.
It just happened. He asked for news and water.
Gilly added as Samwell quickly kissed her and left to find Jon. Sam entered Bran's room to find out Jon and his other siblings had already known.
Samwell Tarly?
Exclaimed an energetic Lord Brandon Stark. He seemed excited to see how many people had survived the battle for Winterfell.
Can you tell us more of what you remember?
Asked Lady Sansa, and Bran was surprisingly tight-lipped. It seemed to Sam that he had more information to share, but this was not the right time. Jon then approached Samwell.
Take them all to the caves. Daenerys and I will meet you there shortly, and keep your eyes open. Our sailing to Dragonstone is predictable, and I'm uneasy we're here.
Jon finished nervously as Sam nodded and left to find Lord Tyrion. The Hand had joined Gilly in conversation, as had Munda and Missandei. The ladies had arrived from the other 4 ships that had anchored near this barren island. 2 skiffs stood ready to take them ashore when the all clear was received. Lord Tyrion's attention turned to Samwell as he walked towards them.
You think we'll find what we're looking for?
Whether we do or we don't is irrelevant,
suggested Samwell Tarly. Lord Tyrion then interrupted his next thought.
There's no sense in being pessimistic, Tarly. It won't work out anyway.
Joked Lord Tyrion, and the 2 men on board with the largest vocabulary had a small chuckle. The Unsullied reported back to the beach and lit their signal fire. Lord Tyrion, Ser Jorah, Samwell, Gilly, Munda, Missandei, and various deckhands piled into the skiffs and set off for dry land. The landing party reached the beachhead and the deckhands then secured the boats. Lord Tyrion led his entourage to the caves and the Unsullied flanked them the entire way. Ser Jorah lit numerous torches from the Unsullied beach fire and they entered the echoing void. They walked single file behind Ser Jorah as dragonglass had littered their walkway. The smaller shards left behind would crunch and clang underneath their boots. Sam would hear the occasional gasp that would immediately warrant his full attention. Missandei would stare and run her fingers along the wall. They passed the stockpile of dragonglass and took in the view. Ser Jorah proceeded on, as he was unaware of those around him. Samwell was mesmerized by the cave. To think the first men and the children left their thoughts here for all eternity was enough to make him giddy. Munda and Missandei were deep in conversation. The pair kept their voices low but were impassioned in their speech. Samwell carefully proceeded over to them.
Did you find something?
Aye, we did,
responded Munda, and Samwell pressed his torch to the wall as there were multiple figures carved into it.
Here.
Pointed Missandei at the spiral pattern underneath what appeared to be the first men.
When placed between 2 blokes, it stands for competition or battle. When it's placed above, it stands for mercy.
But this symbol is placed below the first men,
stated Samwell with an acute questioning tone.
And what would that mean?
Judgment,
informed Munda with a worrisome tone, and Missandei reluctantly nodded in agreement.
And what of the other symbol?
Beginning of.
Munda revealed, and Samwell gulped down his realization of what this meant. This was not a battle nor a war. It was an extermination. Sam's knees felt wobbly but refused to show his apprehension in front of Gilly. He turned to see Ser Jorah and Lord Tyrion at the far end of the cave. Samwell came up on their conversation to only hear the words, "Last hero." This was a story all children learned in Westeros.
The final battle that ended the long night?
The very same, Lord Tarly.
Lord Tyrion responded curtly.
Do you remember how many men ranged north during the climactic battle?
Around dozen, if my memory correctly serves.
Samwell answered quickly. The cave lit slightly brighter as Jon and Daenerys had entered the cave. They initially stopped to speak to Missandei and Munda. Jon's body language indicated he felt the same way as Sam regarding their translation. Munda was clearly still distraught regarding her own father's death.
What of this symbol?
Jon asked regarding the symbol Munda Giantsbane kept running her hand across.
Roshumba. It means family in the old tongue.
Munda explained with her own gruff voice slightly cracking.
Roshumba.
Jon repeated, and then repeated again aloud to himself, committing it to his own memory. Queen Daenerys stayed to speak to her advisor, and Jon approached his in kind. Samwell expected Lord Tyrion to speak to Jon, but it was Ser Jorah who addressed him first.
Your Grace.
Ser Jorah announced with his typical dramatic flair.
Tell me what you see.
Ser Jorah asked. He was referring to the markings on the cave wall that showed the Night King and 6 other White Walkers.
The enemy,
responded King Jon simply. Still, Ser Jorah seemed dissatisfied.
Closer, Your Grace,
suggested Ser Jorah. King Jon held his torch closer to see what the old bear was referring to.
You've seen him many times. I only once. Outside the walls of Winterfell as he rode past the 2 of us. I may be mistaken, but this Night King looks different. A beard, his armor. It may have been thousands of years in between the last hero and our own battles. But there may be something to this.
Aye. The library here is still intact, Sam. Please continue your research on the Long Night.
King Jon ordered, and Samwell nodded in agreement as Gilly took his hand. The landing party exited the cave to see the sun setting over the west side of the island. 3 additional ships had recently arrived from the northeast. Lady Sansa and Arya were escorting Bran up to the castle from the beach, as an additional skiff had reached the shore. Sir Jaime and Lady Brienne exited the skiff and waded onto the beach. Lord Tyrion then met with his older brother. Both men grateful each other had survived. Brienne then approached Lady Sansa. Samwell guessed what the topic of conversation could possibly be. Lady Brienne took the news with difficulty but attempted to conceal it. No doubt she was thrilled to see Lady Sansa alive, but the death of Podrick was news she was not prepared for. Lord Varys' ship dropped canvas just outside Dragonstone before sunrise the next day. His skiff reached the beach in darkness, only lit by a beach bonfire away from the castle's steep staircases. Lord Varys approached the fire, his curiosity now getting the better of him. He heard the familiar hums and chanting of the ridiculous religious ceremonies he had come to detest. The Red Woman was alone, staring into the tall flames, though her eyes remained tightly shut. Lord Varys took the liberty of attempting to startle her by acutely revealing his presence. She merely welcomed him before he had the chance to announce himself.
Good evening, Lord Varys.
Almost morning.
Lord Varys retorted with a mild disdain in his calm, reserved voice.
The end of our story grows near.
Melisandre claimed. She tossed a powdered substance into the brightened flames, and they momentarily doubled in size with a stiff roar.
More visions in the flames.
Mocked Lord Varys. He considered behaving himself amongst these radicals, but the opportunity was too perfect to resist.
Our Lord's messages reveal themselves in time.
How convenient it must be to serve both masters of prophecy and truth, though they rarely coincide. Did you see our deaths? The end to our stories?
As soon as one chapter closes, another begins. Our fates have been intertwined for some time, my lord. You have always acted to preserve life, as much as possible, and you have suffered tremendously. The Lord of Light looks kindly on those who preserve his creation. You will be rewarded in the end. But I fear more suffering in your immediate future.
She warned as a smug smile crept along Lord Varys' face. He knew what she was trying to accomplish. Lord Varys was preparing his retort when something in his peripheral had warranted his attention. They were not the only 2 taking advantage of the dim light upon the beach. A woman's grunts were faintly heard at a distance. Melisandre noticed their visitor shortly after Lord Varys had.
Come, Lord Varys.
She offered before slowly reaching into the fire, ever intentional, so Lord Varys would notice. She scooped up a handful of fire, and it danced in the palm of her hand. She slowly walked towards the audible young woman down the beach, and naturally a curious Lord Varys had followed. The Red Woman then watched as Lady Arya practiced her swordsmanship. She approached the young Stark, as Lady Arya had finally noticed the pair of them.
You!
Lady Arya accused simply. She obviously had more to say, but was interrupted by her own thoughts. Lady Arya couldn't make sense of the torchless light that flickered from the Red Woman's palm.
Many eyes you have shut, Arya Stark, and many more you will.
Revealed the Red Woman. Lady Arya was speechless as the High Priestess approached her now even closer and gazed into her eyes. The sight of Lady Arya fascinated Melisandre. The Red Woman calmly and shockingly mouthed her words, but her voice seemed to fail her.
He revealed himself to you.
The fire in her palm then extinguished and cast them into near darkness. Melisandre turned to walk up the beach. Lord Varys knew she had been rattled as Arya looked to him in confusion, but Lord Varys merely shrugged and politely excused himself. The long walk up the twisting staircase to the castle was always exhausting. Lord Varys took a detour to his favorite location on the island. The jagged cliffs on the northeast bank are where he always found peace and solitude. The cliff was at least 100 feet high, and the water below was deep enough to draft a ship. He waited for the sun to rise, its light just now starting to break the deep pink horizon. Deep breaths he took while he digested the Red Woman's heckles. Surely her taunts could foster entertainment at the very least. Lord Varys noticed a raven departing the beach. He thought this odd since it was travelled west. King's Landing was the only location west since the reach was no longer sustainable. The man who let the raven loose had noticed Varys and slowly, silently approached him. His long black cloak even covered his boots, and his hood had obscured his face. Lord Varys called out to the menacing man, now just steps from him. A quick swing of the stranger's arm and Lord Varys toppled over. He rolled onto his back to see an outpouring of tacky red blood covering the front of his robes. The handle of a throwing knife was protruding out of his belly. Lord Varys inched closer to the cliff, and the cloaked man was now standing over him. He reached down and quickly removed the knife from the struggling spider. Lord Varys knew this was his end, though he didn't think Melisandre would be this correct. This soon. Just as he pondered his last thought, an unsullied battle spear pierced the ground from a distance, mere inches from Lord Varys's bleeding form. The cloaked man clearly panicked and leapt over Lord Varys into a head-first dive elegantly over the cliff and into the bluest water below. Lord Varys felt tired, extremely tired, and decided to just rest his eyes for a brief moment. Queen Daenerys was walking along the Dragonstone beaches as the weather was surprisingly mild. It seemed as if the snow had never fallen. It reminded her of a typical summer afternoon in Essos. She watched as her dragons flew circles around the castle. She couldn't understand why there were 4 dragons in total, but she thought little of it. Daenerys then noticed Ghost alone on the beach. She decided to follow him after the direwolf seemed to notice her, although he kept on trotting up the beach. Queen Daenerys inferred that he wanted her to follow him. Ghost then stopped at the cave entrance. He glanced over his shoulder to ensure Daenerys was still on his track. She then followed him into the cave, and the temperature immediately dropped to freezing. Daenerys was walking inside the dark cave as the floor felt like ice. She proceeded carefully and could no longer see the direwolf. As she came to a small clearing in the cave, it brightened significantly. A weirwood tree stood in the center, and she was surrounded by water on all sides. A horrible noise alarmed her from overhead. She looked up to see Drogon dive uncontrollably into the water as if he was dying. The wave he created washed over her and swept her feet out from underneath her. She was now drowning in the icy river. She attempted to swim towards the riverbank. She could see Ghost at the water's edge howling at her. Queen Daenerys knew she would never reach the shore in time. She went over the water's edge and her stomach then rose into her throat. She held her breath, anticipating the impact below. The fear from the fall snapped Daenerys out of her dream. The room was cold, though she was covered in sweat. She lay in bed naked next to her king, whom she had woken. He turned to her, his face full of concern.
More dreams.
Yes, more of the same. Except this time it included a direwolf.
Glad to see the wolf is trying to take hold.
Perhaps every queen requires a little wolf inside her.
It's not that little...
smiled Jon as he kissed her until she fully awoke.
The council meets in an hour. Is that enough time?
Inquired her king. She nodded, still biting her lower lip, a clear invitation to Jon. Still, she saw his concern regarding her own subconscious. She took his face in her hands and kissed him again, as if it was their first.
I hope other people love like this. Otherwise, this world might not be worth saving.
She finished before they were interrupted by a knock at the door.
It is Missandei, Your Grace.
Announced a voice through the door. King Jon answered and greeted his queen's advisor. It wasn't the first time Missandei had seen King Jon fully. He had become rather accustomed to it since their bedding ceremony in Winterfell some weeks prior. Jon quickly dressed and departed their chambers. Missandei then assisted the queen dress herself for the day.
You're up early.
Acknowledged Queen Daenerys without thinking.
I don't sleep much these nights.
Missandei responded politely. Queen Daenerys then quickly realized the reason for her advisor's sleepless nights.
We never spoke properly regarding Grey Worm.
Queen Daenerys admitted reluctantly, and Missandei was slow to respond.
No. I suppose I wasn't ready to speak to anyone. There is equally troubling news this morning, I'm afraid.
Missandei revealed, and Queen Daenerys sat up straighter in her chair.
What news is there?
Queen Daenerys inquired impatiently.
Another 23 ships arrived in the night. One was carrying Lord Varys. He was on the cliff's edge in the early morning, and was attacked.
Missandei paused and noticed a look of shock on the queen's face.
How is he?
Asked the queen as a stern look returned to her face.
Not well. A single stab wound. No weapon found.
Reported Missandei, and Queen Daenerys was quick to respond.
He still lives.
Only just. Samwell Tarly gives him only half a chance at best.
Missandei finished, and Daenerys did not answer as she was now fully dressed.
The Unsullied chased off his attacker, who dove over the cliff to escape them.
Missandei finished, almost ashamed to admit this could happen on the Queen's Isle.
Was it a Lannister?
Asked the Queen, though it was more of a statement.
They saw no colors, Your Grace.
Missandei revealed quietly. She appeared to have fewer answers than the Queen had questions.
I will want to speak with the Unsullied immediately.
Yes, my Queen. I'll arrange it before the War Council.
Responded Missandei, and Queen Daenerys thought on it.
Better afterwards. Where is Lord Tyrion?
Queen Daenerys asked as she sipped her glass.
Lord Varys' bedside, along with Ser Jorah.
Answered Missandei as she cleaned her hands in a wash basin.
I can finish up here. Please send for the pair of them.
Commanded Queen Daenerys as politely as she could.
Right away, Your Grace.
Responded Missandei respectfully. In what seemed like hours to Daenerys, Ser Jorah and Lord Tyrion had finally arrived.
What do we know?
She asked simply but sternly.
The attempt was unsuccessful. Although the perpetrator remains at large, a body has not yet been found in the water.
No other thoughts or theories?
Demanded Daenerys, and Ser Jorah was surprisingly quiet as Lord Tyrion looked equally uneasy.
We are about to brief an invasion of the Red Keep, and we don't know who we can trust.
It's not likely a single assassin would have been sent by Cersei. It is, however, likely that Lord Varys had information someone did not want revealed.
Find out who and why.
Demanded Queen Daenerys, to the noticeable tension in the air.
The Mormont way.
Exclaimed Lord Tyrion, trying to diffuse that same tension. Queen Daenerys' head tilted slightly, expecting an explanation.
Long, sullen silences.
Answered Ser Jorah before Lord Tyrion offered further clarification.
And the occasional punch in the face.
Joked Lord Tyrion carefully. The following silence offered Lord Tyrion and Ser Jorah an excuse to depart the Queen's chambers. Queen Daenerys could not help but notice their constant exchange of looks. It made her uneasy, though the upcoming assault on the Red Keep would provide her with a distraction. Queen Daenerys remained in the war room at Dragonstone. She was pleased to see many people had survived the battle for Winterfell. a vast table ordered built by Aegon the Conqueror himself held a detailed drawing of the Red Keep. Round the table waited all the members of Westeros whom names the Queen could remember. Queen Daenerys signaled to Jon as he was the first to speak.
Sandor Clegane was kind enough to provide detailed prints of the Red Keep. The key to defeating the army of the dead will be the destruction of the Night King. We know due to Theon Greyjoy's sacrifice that Dragonglass has no effect on him. Nay does Dragonfire. The objective now will be to acquire more Valyrian steel.
It's worth 1,000 times its weight in gold. House Lannister has been unable to acquire it for centuries.
We know where we might acquire some. A lot, actually.
Your Grace, where can we find it?
Diligently inquired the Queen's hand.
The Iron Throne.
Answered Daenerys, and a hush enveloped the table.
We may have a way forward in reforging it. Arrows, daggers, and a longsword or two. A handful of us will ride the pair of dragons to the throne room, melt it on site, and extract the steel. We know the throne is composed of a mixture of different metals. Valyrian steel was much more prevalent 300 years ago.
How will we know then?
Asked a skeptical Lord Tyrion. Jon then nodded at Lord Gendry.
The melting point is much higher for Valyrian steel. I'll be directly behind the Dragon Rider advising on when to call off the Dragonfire. The blades will then be collected whole.
Only one person here can bear picking up red-hot steel.
Advised Ser Jorah, glancing at his queen. Daenerys then directed his attention towards Lady Yara.
The Ironborn worked through the night and created them.
Lady Yara finished as she placed a half-dozen blue leather gauntlets on the painted table.
Made from the hide of Viserion. After he died, of course.
It's settled then. Queen Daenerys will ride Drogon, along with Lord Gendry and Ser Jorah. I will be on Rhaegal with Arya, the Hound and Ghost.
King Jon finished. He expected some resistance in his choices, but there was only one. Ser Jorah then addressed his queen directly.
I may not be as much use to you as you would like. My injuries during the battle with the dead has left my movement somewhat limited, Khaleesi.
Ser Jorah admitted. Daario scoffed, and this did not go unnoticed by Ser Jorah.
Might I suggest Ser Beric, my queen? He knows the Red Keep as well as anyone.
Very well, sir.
Was all the queen would say.
Once the dragons depart the island, the Unsullied will sail for Blackwater Bay. Lord Tyrion and Ser Davos will accompany them. The rest of our forces will ride for Harrenhal. Those injured will remain on the ships. Dragonstone is a strategic target. We will not be here for long.
Why Harrenhal?
Asked Sir Jaime to the general agreement of those surrounding the painted table.
The forges here are ill-equipped, and Lord Gendry is already familiar with the Harrenhal forges.
It's settled then. We fly within the hour.
Announced the Queen. Conversation had started within a few groups as Lord Tyrion sought out his elder brother.
This is goodbye for now.
Sail well, little brother.
Fight well, dearest brother.
Responded Lord Tyrion as the brothers embraced. Slowly they filed out until only Daenerys and Daario remained. He stared, as she knew he would. He refused to speak out of frustration. So Daenerys left him, alone with just his thoughts. Sam and Jon were escorting a wounded Lord Varys to Yara's flagship for transport. The fleet was headed to King's Landing, but Yara would sail past it. She planned to sail upriver on the Blackwater Rush, and then through the God's Eye to Harrenhal itself. They were accompanied by Lady Sansa, Arya, and the remaining Northmen, as well as a handful of second sons who no longer had horses. Lord Varys was placed in a cabin, still unconscious. His body burned with a fever that Sam did not know how to treat.
Likely an infection.
Samwell admitted he knew there was little they could do while on the run. Once Lord Varys was secured, Sam and Jon went to go check on Bran. He was awake and in good spirits as he greeted them upon entry to his cabin.
Arya said you left the Godswood for some time during the battle. She said you seemed to be in pain.
Recalled Jon carefully. Samwell was also eager to hear Bran's answer.
I had to contribute. Viserion was the largest threat we were facing.
You entered him?
Inquired Jon while gazing around the room to see who else would hear Bran's answer.
The Night King knew I would try. He entered my own mind and assumed I wouldn't notice. He stood before me, and I could speak with him. He didn't respond. Once I realized where we were, he left Viserion's control to me. I still think my shoulder hurts sometimes.
Bran finished. Jon was sorrowful his brother had to endure that kind of pain. Through his sorrow, he realized the Night King always seemed one step ahead of them.
I wish you good fortune, Jon.
Any advice?
We'll speak at Harrenhal.
Answered Bran. Samwell then went to check on Lord Varys. He was startled by the additional body in the room. Melisandre had boarded the ship and was watching over the Spider. Her attention immediately shifted to Lady Arya, which prompted her to hastily leave. Samwell acknowledged the Red Woman and attended to Varys's bedside.
He will live.
She claimed, and Samwell acted as if he did not hear her.
So why is he in need of you?
We are all still in danger. Lord Varys most of all.
Melisandre claimed. Samwell hastily removed himself from the Red Woman's presence. Jon and Sam then walked towards the skiff in deep conversation.
So Bran can enter the mind of a White and meet with the Night King.
So it would seem it might be useful as a parley.
So could have your Uncle Benjen.
Fair point.
Jon admitted as Lady Arya had now joined them topside.
Jon, it nearly killed Bran.
Exclaimed Lady Arya at her brother.
Aye, us too.
Jon added. They stopped to look upon the aft platform. Lord Vaelin and Little Sam had fashioned toy swords from tree branches and were dueling as Yara and Gilly watched. Samwell didn't know how to feel about this sight. He then turned to Jon.
We have to win. We have lost so much and yet still have too much to lose.
We will, Sam. We will deal with this.
Jon paused and looked up at Vaelin and Little Sam.
So they don't have to.
Jon replied before Samwell embraced him.
Make it back, all right?
Always do,
replied Jon as he started to climb down the rope ladder that draped over the side of the ship. The fleet had begun to set sail for King's Landing. The dragons had fed and were ready for their flight. A crowd was gathering on the cliff tops as Jon had already mounted Rhaegal in an attempt to calm the beast before flight. Ser Jorah bid farewell to his queen. Their goodbyes had become all too familiar. Ser Jorah watched as Ghost leapt onto Rhaegal's hind leg, shoulder, and then onto his back. Ser Jorah theorized the wolf had done this before. While his eyes were focused on Rhaegal's back, he noted a glaring look coming from Lady Arya's eyes. He then turned to look in the same direction as the young lady. He noticed Lord Gendry took his assigned seat behind Queen Daenerys on Drogon's back. Ser Jorah grinned to himself. It brought him peace that there was still normal things that existed in this world, like a young woman's jealousy. The dragons took to the sky with their familiar gust of wind they would bestow upon the ground. Ser Jorah then immediately departed for the east side of the island. To no surprise, he found what he was looking for. Daario Naharis had just released a raven and watched as it took flight. Daario had then noticed Ser Jorah's presence.
Jorah the Andal. Didn't expect to see you up here. I figured you'd be sulking somewhere, wishing you hadn't wasted your youth.
Daario taunted as he watched his raven. Without warning, an arrow had pierced the bird and it immediately fell to the ground. Dario's shoulders slumped as the bird fell to the beach and was set upon by a handful of men, all carrying bows.
The Ironborn.
Informed Ser Jorah with an air of smugness.
The best archers in the world.
Ser Jorah finished and Daario immediately unstrapped his arak. He knew the trap had been sprung. 20 paces separated the two men. Daario took 3 steps forward, and Ser Jorah held up his hand in protest. Daario paused as an arrow landed and stuck into the ground between them.
Best archers I see.
Daario taunted. He again took another step as a second arrow landed and had split the first. Daario looked confused, as Ser Jorah then slowly drew Longclaw.
1 for honor, 2 for treason. Best archers indeed, but not the fastest of readers.
Laughed Ser Jorah to a dumbstruck Daario.
No matter. After I deal with you, I can tend to them, as I remain the most formidable warrior on this damned island.
Daario claimed as Ser Jorah led Dario's eyes back out to sea. He saw an archer loose an arrow out to sea and land on the deck of Yara Greyjoy's flagship.
That arrow carried your treasonous message, proof of your betrayal of Queen Daenerys. They're sailing for Harrenhal, and far from your reach.
Taunted Ser Jorah. Daario pursed his lips as he had been outmaneuvered and had nowhere to run. He knew Daenerys would find him wherever he went. Ser Jorah then interrupted Dario's thoughts.
You once accused me of having a suspicious mind. Only a dishonest man can see a dishonest man for what he is. But why?
Queen Cersei scoured Essos for reinforcements. Naturally, she inquired about the second sons. But what I provided for her was much more valuable than steel. She paid heavily for the information I received from Varys. I would have given it to her freely, truth be told.
The Greyjoy ambush of the Casterly Rock offensive.
Ser Jorah asked, and Daario bowed deeply in agreement.
And Lord Tyrion and Sir Jaime's meeting under the Red Keep.
Ser Jorah was then interrupted by Daario.
Love is as good of a reason for betrayal as any other. Now they fly into King's Landing, where Cersei is expecting them.
Exclaimed Daario proudly.
That message we have.
Corrected Ser Jorah, although his confidence was low at his own presumption.
That message refers to Harrenhal. Your infiltration message I sent this morning.
Taunted Daario, and Ser Jorah's concern heightened.
The Queen left you behind, so you betrayed her trust, and countless lives were lost. How childish.
Scolded Ser Jorah, patiently awaiting the Fighting Pit champion's response.
Looks like I will be that shit that kills an old man.
Responded Daario as he quickly charged at Ser Jorah. Daario was on the offensive. He jump-kicked and landed blows that bounced off Ser Jorah's plated armor. Daario moved fluidly, but Ser Jorah remained defensive and rigid. Ser Jorah deflected blows but refused offensive measures. They locked swords and circled each other. Ser Jorah's eyes peered over Daario's shoulder. Daario continued to circle Ser Jorah, forcing his arms to lower as their swords remained engaged. An arrow pierced through Dario's left hand. He stumbled backwards and clamped down on the arrow with his teeth and pulled it from his hand.
Get fucked, cunt!
Screamed Osman from below. Daario frustratedly charged at Ser Jorah but missed his slash. Ser Jorah recovered and grasped the backside of his sword hand that had overswung. In a single fluid motion, Ser Jorah then dropped Longclaw, grasped Dario's knife from his belt and brought it down on his backside, stabbing him in the small of his back. Daario dropped to his knees and Jorah walked around behind him. Blood poured from his mouth as Ser Jorah grasped his hair and drew his head back. He then whispered into his ear.
You loved that knife. I'll be sure you're buried with it.
Ser Jorah responded with a measured loathing. He released his head before kicking the hilt of the knife in his back hard enough that the blade now protruded out of his belly. Daario looked down and collapsed to the ground. Osman had then made his way up to the cliff.
Time to cue Fuckwit City, eh?
Chuckled Osman while securing his bow to his back.
You shoot well, as do your men.
Complimented Ser Jorah as he retrieved and sheathed Longclaw.
Bloody brilliant plan, mate. He felt dodgy anyway. Really thought he was a tough cunt.
Aye, he did. And you need to sail immediately.